we're going to elevate them. We're going to give them free PR. We're going to give them a pat on the back. We're going to make them look good, feel good, sound good on our show. You put them at ease, you make them feel good, and it's just a massive shortcut to the know, like, and trust factor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Passive Cash Flow Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Fragnito, and we have an interesting guest with us this afternoon. We have David Dubeau. How are we doing today, Dave?
Aaron, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here. We were just saying how we're both experienced podcasters, so this should be a good one, a lot of fun here. And, I've actually been following you for some time. We connected I think 3 years ago or so. And but why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do here?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I had the pleasure of having you on my show. I've been running my Property Profits Real Estate podcast since 2018, which is a long time in podcast years. And I think we're coming up on episode 1,200 pretty quickly. So yeah, I've been serious about the podcast thing for quite a while. Been in the whole real estate space since 2003. I've done all sorts of stuff. Started off with the infomercial type, low money, no money down type deals, because that's what I had at the time. And then gradually transitioned into multifamily. Realized a while ago, Aaron, that I kind of suck as an operator. So I far prefer to partner with people that are good at that stuff. Yeah. And these days, I'm more of a passive investor, typically in multifamily deals, which is what your show is all about. And also do a lot of work with syndicators and fund managers, professional real estate capital raisers, to help them connect with accredited investors. And helping people raise capital is what I've been focused on for the last dozen years.
Yeah. Well, that's, I always say raising capital is the pinnacle of my career. I started as a realtor in this business in 2010 and kind of cut my teeth that way doing REOs and short sales. I think I made $500 my first 6 months in real estate. I mean, 2010 was a dismal real estate market in my defense. Just wish I had more capital to buy more properties. But took my licks flipping properties, buying the income properties, leasing them out to the wrong tenants, hiring the wrong management companies, firing 2 of those, starting our own. Operations is a bear. It is tough, especially when you're taking these mismanaged assets and turning them around. Yeah. We buy distressed apartment buildings and we reposition them with our in-house property management company. And it kind of sounds easier than it is. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. The devil's in the details for sure. And that's why I have a good business partner, Seth Martinez, who handles that operations end. But, around 2018, we realized our Achilles heel was really, as we perfected our management, and which we're always doing every day, was really capital raising, right? Yeah. And the more capital you can access, the more properties you can buy, and the more income you can make as a real estate investor, as a business owner, and the more proceeds you can make for your investors too, because actually bigger is better in real estate. We don't buy anything less than 40 units right now because it's hard to make sense of it. Economies of scale. So capital raising is a whole different beast. I had raised capital flipping houses from our real estate networking group, New Jersey Real Estate Network, with about 5,000 members in it. And those investors were used to getting their money back in 12 months. And then all of a sudden, about 6 years ago, I was like, I want to buy apartment buildings more so. And now I was like, hey, investors that invested in my fix and flips, why don't you invest in my apartment buildings and I'll pay you back in 5 years? How's that sound? They're like, no way.
We're not quite as appealing. Exactly.
Yeah, you were paying us like 18% interest in like 12 months. No way are we getting into apartment buildings. So I did go out and learn how to raise capital on a grander scale from real accredited investors. It was very, very challenging. So, that's why I want to have you on the show here. It is challenging to raise capital.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Aaron, because that's kind of been the progression I've taken with the work I've been doing. So for the first 10, 11 years, I was working with the mom and pop, what I call mom and pop real estate investors, kind of like what you were doing when you were doing the flips, and helping them to raise capital, typically from their existing network. Most of them were not as well connected as you with 5,000 people as part of their network, but friends, family members, coworkers, business associates, that kind of thing to get them started. But then, a lot of them were switching out of doing flips and single family homes and getting into bigger deals, getting into multifamily. And now they needed to start spreading their wings and start doing syndications and raising capital on a larger scale. So that's why the last few years I've really, really been laser focused on what is the best way to connect with high income, high net worth individuals, AKA accredited investors. And that's what we've kind of perfected over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. Accredited investors, you can find them at local real estate networking events. But they also, I actually find the best accredited investors to connect at are events that actually really have nothing to do with real estate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And why don't you talk a little bit about,
because it's not so much of a feeding frenzy, is it? It's not that like you go to a real estate event and everybody was trying to raise capital from everybody else. But if you go to a doctor's event or you go to some sort of a chamber of commerce event, then you're probably the only real estate guy there.
Exactly. And also a lot of real estate networking events, those are active investors, right? Those people are trying to buy a duplex or a 5 or 6 unit. And that's great. I mean, that's exactly where I started, right? That's how I built my portfolio to where it is today. So, and I always say there's no right or wrong way to invest in real estate. You can invest actively and passively and complement your portfolio both ways. However, a lot of those kind of do it themselves, investors are you basically have to convert them to becoming a passive investor, which sometimes is a more of an uphill battle than converting someone who is just a high net worth individual,
Yeah.
a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or just a C-suite executive, right, earning $400,000, $500,000 a year and saying, hey, how about you diversify part of your portfolio into real estate, and start building a relationship there. But don't let me do all the talking here. What are some tips of the trade, my friend, in raising capital? What do you have for our listeners here? Yeah.
Well, it actually ties beautifully into what you're just mentioning, Aaron. So it really makes a lot of sense to meet these accredited investors where they're already at, right? So what we found over the years, they typically fall into a couple of different categories. Number one, because we got to think, move back. Most people don't have accredited investor tattooed on their forehead. So we kind of have to figure out who's most likely to be an accredited investor. In my mind, that could be a successful business owner who's been in business for 10 plus years and has 10 plus employees. Chances are they fit the criteria of making 200 grand a year and a net worth of $1 million or more. Chances are, right? Or it could be a professional. Like we always think of doctors and dentists and successful CPAs and lawyers, those kind of people as well. Could be a C-suite executive type person with a really good job at a big company. Those kind of folks typically meet that criteria. So then what is a good way to meet these people on a regular basis without necessarily having to go to a bunch of events, leave the office, that sort of thing? And what I found is that one of the best ways, Aaron, is to have your own investor-facing podcast. Very important distinction there. Investor-facing podcast. So like you mentioned, quite often we're going to have the best success with people who are not necessarily in the real estate space already, right? These are people that are doing their own business, have their own profession. They're not real estate nerds like we are. And I say that with love and respect, but
Sure.
that's what we are. So let's create a podcast that appeals to them, number one, as your ideal guest, like a show that they will want to come on and be interviewed on. And number two, that appeals to them as your ideal audience member as well. So what we're doing, Aaron, is there's really 3 steps to creating what I call a podcast lead generation machine. Step number 1 is create that podcast that appeals to your ideal investor avatar. Step number 2 is find a whole bunch of them and invite them to be guests on your show. And what we do for our clients is we get them 4 or 5 of these interviews booked every week, consistently, short, sweet interviews, 20, 25 minutes. And we block that into 2 time chunks. So they're only busy basically 2 hours twice a week doing these interviews, having these meetings with accredited investors. And that gets them to 20 conversations a month. And then the third piece of the puzzle is converting those conversations into capital. So 3 steps. Build the podcast that appeals to them. Number 2, invite your ideal investor as your guest, 5 of them a week. And number 3, convert those conversations into capital conversations. Does that make sense? Big picture, Aaron?
At People's Capital Group, we help you invest in real estate. Build your wealth by owning professionally managed apartment buildings in the northern New Jersey market. We want to show you how owning real estate is attainable even for the busy professionals that don't have the time or experience investing in real estate. Now, we only work with select people who are serious about building wealth. So find out if you qualify at peoplescapitalgroup.com.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're doing a podcast with someone, you're connecting with them on a level where you're both kind of thought leaders in a space, and you're interacting with them, you're communicating, right? You're exchanging bios and whatnot. So it's a chance for people to connect, and you feel kind of connected after speaking, especially for 20 or 30 minutes. You remember, I mean, look at me and you. I think I did your podcast 3 years ago, and when
Yeah.
your VA reached out to me, I was like, oh yeah, I know this guy, sure. And I get those emails probably like once a day, but I was like, oh, I know Dave Dubeau, so yeah, I'll see how he's doing and reconnect here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, and then you also get a ton of content. I mean, what do you have,
Oh
1,200
man.
episodes, you said, right?
Well, not only that, Aaron, but what we do that's kind of the secret sauce as well is I have another VA. Well, I have my video editing guy slice and dice reels from the
Hmm.
episode.
Hmm.
And I have another VA take the transcript of the episode and create a LinkedIn article, Facebook
Hmm.
post, Instagram post, all this social media stuff. And
Hmm.
then we give that to the guest on a silver platter to help
Hmm.
them leverage their appearance on the show, which also helps us to grow the audience
Hmm.
organically. And
Yeah.
the cool thing is, Aaron, like you and I have been in this podcast thing for a long time. It's old hat for us.
Mhm.
But a lot of these high income, high net worth people have never, ever been invited to be on a podcast before. I got one
Right.
example. One of our clients, we got him a $1 billion fund manager. This gentleman runs a $1 billion fund. We got him to be a guest on our client's show. That gentleman had never, ever been invited to be on anybody's podcast before, believe it or
Wow.
not. That was his first time. So here's this shift in psychology, Aaron. So instead of my client trying to call this guy up cold and convince him to be on to have a sales call about his investment opportunities, it's a complete 180. And now instead, we're inviting that person to be a guest on this podcast. We're going to elevate them. We're going to give them free PR. We're going to give them a pat on the back. We're going to make them look good, feel good, sound good on our show. That's going to create instant rapport. Plus, they're coming to the show feeling a little bit nervous, right? They're the ones that are they're being interviewed. And if they're not used to it, they might be a little nervous. You put them at ease, you make them feel good. And it's just a massive shortcut to the know, like, and trust factor. Does that make
Hmm.
sense, Aaron?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also when you're giving them the content, so the guest goes on the show, and you give them back the transcripts and the shorts and the reels and all the social media editable pieces.
Well,
Then
it's done for them. It's all
yeah,
ready to go. Yeah,
exactly. Right, which is incredible. And also, at that point, the people that follow them are probably similar types of demographic,
exactly.
right? I mean, generally, if you're a dentist, I'd imagine most of your social media following is like, oh, they're dentists, or
Yeah.
people kind of in
Your
that
LinkedIn
demographic.
connections and what have you. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. So if they're posting on their social media now, that's going to open up your brand to a number of other high net worth individuals. So that's beautiful. That's good. Yeah, and it is all about know, like, and trust, right? I mean, if you look at any large scale financial manager, right, like Edward Jones or
Mhm.
right, something like that, it's pictures of like people like laying in a field, like having a picnic with their children or something on a sunny day, which I just did on Saturday afternoon. It was a beautiful
Yeah.
day. Oh my gosh, here in Jersey. So I had a picnic with my little 3-year-old son, and it was a magical moment. It was a very special moment. And that is kind of like if you could bottle that up and sell that, I'd be like, yeah, I'll sign up for that. Like that's what everyone wants, right? Like happiness with their family. So,
Yeah.
and that's what financial security is, right? So you gotta understand kind of what you're selling at the end of the day. It is like trust and know, like, and trust, right? And that's what any good financial advisor does. It says, hey, we're part of your family. We're helping you create these memories with your family and security for the future. Um, and that's kind of our job. I think a lot of people in the fundraising space, and I mean, you get both types too, because you can also put out an ad that's like 19 IRR, cash flow from day one. And like, that does get clicks, so there's like, there's two ways that, I see like oil and gas guys, like, I don't know what it is. Oil and gas guys are straight to the pocketbook. They're like, man, I sign up. I go to these like family office events. I throw my business card in the fishbowl. They're like badgering me. Like, man, last opportunity to get in on this is tomorrow.
Yeah, but isn't that annoying? Like, I mean, obviously it works sometimes, but the amount of rejection those guys go through to get investors is mind-boggling. And if you're okay with that grind, that's fine. But I'm not. Our clients aren't. I don't think that's your style either. And so this is just a much, it's a classier way to make that connection on a much more human basis, and to lead with a giving hand, right? That's what it's all about. It's all about providing that person with a platform, giving them some kudos. Because here's the thing, that $1 billion fund manager, guess what? He goes to work. Nobody's giving him a pat on the back every day at work. Like, he's just going through the grind, dealing with employees and dealing with, all the stuff they have to deal with. He goes home. He's not getting a big pat on the back when he gets home, to his wife and family. It's just the normal. So by bringing these folks onto your show, making them look good, making them feel good, right? Making them shine as a guest on your show. It's just a real value that you're providing to them. It really is. And then all of the content that you create and just giving them that exposure, people appreciate that, right? So then there's the reciprocity. So the methodology that we do there, Aaron, with the show, because it's very important. If you're just going to be interviewing somebody for 20, 25 minutes, you have to have a good flow to your interview. So what we typically recommend is, start off asking the person, getting their insights, their secret sauce to their professional success. What is it that they do that might be a little bit different than other professionals in their field? Get them talking a little bit about that. Then we talk a little bit about personal success as well. How did they, just like you mentioned, you went on a picnic with your 3-year-old son this weekend. That's wonderful. So like, how do you combine professional and personal life and kind of have a little bit of balance there? And then towards the end of the interview, that's where we start to massage the questions towards financial success, right? Without coming across as salesy. Very, very important there, Aaron. So it's a casual type thing. So let's say, Aaron, you were my guest and you aren't a syndicator. You're a doctor or something like that. Let's say it's Dr. Fragnito. So Dr. Fragnito, it sounds like things are going really, really well with your cosmetic surgery business. And, a lot of professionals and doctors in your position, they're making very, very good money now, but they're also looking to the future. How can they continue that level of income without working so hard for it? What are your thoughts about that, Dr. Fragnito? Right. So you get them talking a little bit about what they're doing. Like if they're investing, well, I'm starting to invest in stocks and bonds, or I'm a day trader, I'm dabbling in crypto, or whatever the heck they may or may not be doing, reinvesting everything into my own business. Okay, cool. So you just kind of wrap that up, and then you wrap up the conversation. And then the magic happens at the end of the interview. Once you've stopped the interview, you're still on Zoom with the person and you're touching base. And you say, hey, Dr. Fragnito, yeah, this episode should be coming out in the next 2 months or whenever it's coming out. We'll send you this, this, and this. And oh, by the way, you mentioned that you're, dabbling a little bit in stocks and bonds. Let me ask you a question. How do you feel about the kind of returns that you're getting with those investments and the stability and the security of those returns? Is that something that you feel like it's 100% dialed in, or is there maybe a little bit of room for improvement?
At People's Capital Group, we help you invest in real estate. Build your wealth by owning professionally managed apartment buildings in the northern New Jersey market. We want to show you how owning real estate is attainable, even for the busy professionals that don't have the time or experience investing in real estate. Now, we only work with select people who are serious about building wealth. So find out if you qualify at peoplescapitalgroup.com.
What's Dr. Fragnito going to say? There's always room for improvement, right?
Room for improvement. Show them the money.
I don't care who you interview. It could be Warren Buffett. There's always room for improvement. Well, cool. Dr. Fragnito, we're working with some other busy doctors like yourself in the alternative investing space in apartment buildings. And the great thing is we're able to get them solid, steady Eddie, double-digit returns on their money. And it's backed by a tangible asset, real property. There's massive demand. We're 2 million units short in the country right now. And one of the best things is at the same time, we're able to help them lower their tax bills significantly. Is that something you might be interested in taking a look at? Boom, book them into a follow-up discovery call. Does that make sense, Aaron?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you have a second podcast, or is this podcast also called Profits Real Estate Podcast or do you have like a separate brand that you interview high net worth individuals on?
Personally, I'm working with capital raisers and we're building their podcast for them, and we're helping them to connect with the accredited investors.
All right. Okay. Got it. So
my whole podcast is about real estate guys and gals.
Yeah. Got it.
And I'm bringing them on and we're talking, and I'm doing this whole process.
Right.
If they're interested in connecting with accredited investors. So I drink my own Kool-Aid.
Okay. Got it. Wow. My mind is blown. Okay. Right. Cause you're in the coaching business. So your target demographic.
No, it's not coaching. We provide done for you services. It's basically a marketing agency. We do everything.
Okay. All right. So you're in the marketing business. So of course, and so you use the same model that you're able to offer your
practice what I preach. Yeah.
Practice what you preach. Oh, beautiful. Okay. That makes sense. And I actually, I met another company a while ago. They would do something like this, but they do like 5-minute podcasts. And I guess that I didn't really, they would like burn them through them, and the idea was you do like one a day, so you'd have like 5 guests a week. It was a little much, but yeah, so that's interesting though. Okay. And then, so now I'm just curious about, your service. Look, you're good, because look at me, I'm in the business of raising capital, and I'm thinking to myself, I already have the podcast,
we were talking a little bit off screen, off camera.
Yeah.
So in your case, you're at the stage now where you are connecting with family offices and institutional capital, right? So what a good way to connect with those kind of high level people, right? Because this is a way to get through the gatekeeper. It's like, hey, I'd like to invite the president of your company to be a featured guest on my show. And your show's been going for years, and you got tons of credibility already built up there. And a lot of them are going to say yes. And then you basically that's your foot in the door with these people.
Yeah, that's true, actually. I mean, I do find some family offices are kind of secretive, institutional capital, but institutional capital is a little different. You could certainly get a number of those guys on. They're very busy. They're usually, extremely successful, of course, but that is a great way to get your foot in the door. And, you're absolutely right, but I do still have a good group of accredited investors. We have about 100 accredited investors, about 83% retention rate amongst them. But, I'm always building that. I wouldn't be able to approach family offices and institutional level investors if I didn't have my accredited investors behind me, our track record.
Are you open to a tip or two around that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Let it rip.
Yeah, man. So something that we're doing with our podcaster clients right now is going to those existing investors. Like you've got, how many of them did you say? You got
about 100. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say you got 100 existing accredited investors.
Yeah.
If I were you, I might consider cherry picking the top 25. Like out of those 100 investors, there's probably more than that, but pick the top 20, 25 that if you could clone those people and have a whole bunch more of them, you do that all day long, right?
Right.
So then here's the trick. You interview them on your podcast, Aaron. Okay. You bring them on, you interview them on their podcast. But again, it's all about featuring them. It's not about showering ourselves with that sort of thing. Feature them. And then at the end of the podcast, you're still on Zoom with them. Then you can kind of just do a quick review of what kind of returns you've been getting them. Remind them about the kind of returns. Record that second recording. And then get some video testimonials from those existing investors. Very, very powerful. Second thing you can do, get warm introductions to their friends and their coworkers who are like them for potential guests for the show, as well as just potential investor conversations. And number 3, it's another great way to create content for yourself. But then here's the real magic. You find their sphere. So we do a lot of work on LinkedIn. So chances are those 100 people, you're connected to quite a few of them on LinkedIn. Would that be fair to say?
Oh,
Yeah. So then you can expand and you can go and invite their connections to be your guest on your show, right? Find more people like them because chances are they're connected to a lot of people just like themselves, right? So
Yeah.
I call that the spider web technique. That's the way to
Mm-hmm.
kind of go out from your existing investors and connect with a lot more of them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, this works well if you're doing, 4 or 5 of these interviews a week, which sounds a little overwhelming, but it's not. It's about time blocking. So
Right.
when we're working with clients, they block 2 hours twice a week. They have space for up to 3 interviews in each of those 2-hour blocks. That's how we get them, 5, 6 interviews a week booked every single week. And then
Right.
bang, 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 kind of turn it into a daily show.
And is that working? That's them interviewing guests for their show, or is that them going on other people's shows, or even a little
No,
bit of
that's
both?
them interviewing guests on their show.
Okay, got it. Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I've also, as a little side note here, one time I had my VA just contacting podcast shows, and I went on about 70 podcasts. I did this probably about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I did get some investors from. I did make some contacts there, and there was actually some investment capital raised from that. I always, I was thinking actually when you popped up, I was like, I should do that again, and go on a lot of other shows. Do you also do that? It looks like you have a outreach there, right, to get on other shows because that's a great way.
Yeah, it's a great way to cross-seminate things for sure. Yeah, to do I call them podcast swaps.
Sure.
Quite often you can reach out. You've got your own podcast. You can reach out to somebody else with a podcast,
Yeah.
and do a swap. You interview them, they interview you.
Yeah.
Everybody's happy. So yeah, that works very, very well. But the whole trick to this, the primary focus to this methodology, Aaron, which I call the Capital Conversation and Conversion Podcast, the main focus of this is let's skip to the front of the line and let's interview the exact kind of people we want as our clients. Does that make sense? The exact kind of people we want as our investors. Let's interview them. Let's put them in the spotlight, make them look good, feel good, sound good, and create that connection and convert that into an actual capital conversation, a discovery meeting, right? And that's how you get the ball rolling and nurture them into an investor.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting. Yeah, I guess you also have to be, I'm just thinking out loud. You have to be careful, not sacrificing quality of your podcast, because I do like to create, quality shows. But then again, having a high net worth individual who talks about their passive investments. This is called the Passive Cash Flow Podcast. So, having someone on who speaks about that isn't all that different than a financial advisor or a fellow syndicator, or, we just had on a tax expert and so on. And so, yeah, I think that actually would create value for our listeners, and that's extremely important. Of course, that's the purpose of the podcast. So that's interesting business, Dave. I like what you do there.
Thanks,
yeah, absolutely. And so it sounds like you've been doing this for a while, right? About 4 or 5 years.
No, this is, I've been doing this for myself. Like I converted my podcast over into a lead generating podcast about 3 years ago. And then the light bulb went off about a year ago. It's like, hey, this is working really well for me. I think this would be a good service for syndicators and higher level capital raisers. So we actually just started this as a done for you service coming up on a year ago. April of 2024 is when we started.
Okay. And then, so what is the service exactly? You reach out to, or how does it work if someone signs up with you there?
Yeah. Well, basically, it's 3 simple steps. It's got a lot of stuff involved in it. But the first thing is we figure out what kind of podcast to create for them. So we come up with the title, the theme, the ideal avatar they're going after, and we build out the podcast for them. So all of the back end stuff and the CRMs and the landing pages and websites, all that techie stuff that you're very familiar with. We build all of that for them. Second step is we fill it up with their ideal investor avatar as guests. So we get it to the point where we've got them 5 of these interviews a week, again, time blocked. So it's very, very efficient. And then we take care of all of the production services for them. So the video and audio editing, uploading, scheduling, releasing, the content creation for the guest as well as the host. All of that stuff gets taken care of in the background. And we help our clients to convert those conversations into discovery calls and then into capital. So it's kind of a total done for you service. So the nice thing is our clients show up on Zoom twice a week with a smile and a clean shirt. And their number one job is to remember to press record and have nice conversations. So
that's interesting. All right, great. What do you do if someone already has a podcast in place? Do you have like a kind of a different service there, or how would that work?
Yeah, potentially. We could look at that. It really depends on what the goals are, but yeah, we can do that as well. But our specialty is really getting people set up and launched with their podcast from scratch, because that way, we know they're set up and they're doing it the way that works.
Yeah, makes sense. Sense. Okay, that's really interesting. Well, no, Dave, I think it's a great model there. I am somewhat familiar with it myself, having a podcast, of course, myself. I know that it is a great way to connect with people, and it's a great way to build your brand. And I always say to real estate syndicators, if you don't have a podcast, then you're not a real estate syndicator. So it's pretty much a passage into the syndication space. But no, that's great to hear. All right, so thank you, Dave. That's really awesome stuff. So how can people reach out to you and learn more and connect with you?
Oh, thanks, Aaron. So I've just written a new book, How to Get 20 Accredited Investor Meetings Every Month, following this Capital Conversation Conversion podcast process. So folks can get a free copy of the book if they go to a PDF copy of the book, if they go to the website 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com. Again, that's the number 20 accreditedinvestorsbook.com.
Awesome. All right, Dave. I like that stuff. Well, thanks for coming on the show here. And as I was saying, I want to have Dave on the show to our listeners, because raising capital has been one of the biggest challenges of my career, but it's also allowed me and my business partner to acquire a lot more real estate and larger assets and grow to the level of working with family offices and institutional capital and retail accredited investors as well. To our listeners, and if you're enjoying our content here, hit subscribe on YouTube, or the Passive Cash Flow Podcast on YouTube there, and on all major podcast platforms as well. So make sure you subscribe to our show there, and share this with a friend. If you're enjoying our content, come up with a new episode every single month. Share this with someone that you think would gain value from learning about passive investments. We focus often on real estate, but also other asset classes as well. And today was an interesting episode talking about raising capital and being introduced to the types of people that you want to be speaking to. And this could actually apply to like a lot of different businesses if you really think about it. So it's a pretty interesting business model. Dave, one more time, what's that website people can go to?
Yes, 20 accreditedinvestorsbook.com.
Thanks a lot, Dave. And of course, you can go to peoplescapitalgroup.com and learn more about our investment opportunities there. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Have a great day.